When Leo, a struggling single father whose world had shrunk to the size of his daughter's smile, and the ever-growing stack of unpaid bills, opened his door on a storm-lashed night, he saw only a shivering, rain-soaked girl huddled in the meager shelter of his apartment's alcove. He offered her his hand, a warm meal, and a safe place for the night, a simple act of humanity that was second nature to him, an instinct carved from his own hardship. He did this, never knowing that this quiet, haunted girl was Clara Sterling, the only daughter of the city's most powerful and reclusive millionaire. He was entirely unaware that this one small gesture of kindness, this brief intersection of two impossibly different worlds, was not an endpoint but a beginning, a single ripple that would irrevocably alter the course of his life, his daughter's future, and the very soul of a man who thought he had lost everything that mattered. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The rain fell in relentless slanting sheets, turning the city into a watercolor painting of blurred neon lights and slick black asphalt. For Leo, the sound was a familiar, dreary percussion against the thin glass of his bus window, a soundtrack to the bone-deep weariness that had settled in his shoulders and the hollow ache in his stomach. Every day was a careful calculation of pennies and minutes, a tightrope walk between hope and despair. His job at the downtown warehouse demanded his strength, paying just enough to keep the flickering lights on in their small, two-room apartment and put food, however simple, on the table for his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. She was the sun in his perpetually overcast world, the singular reason he pushed through the exhaustion and the quiet desperation that nipped at his heels. As he stepped off the bus, the worn-out soles of his shoes soaking through in an instant, he clutched the small paper bag in his hand. It held a carton of milk and a slightly bruised apple, a meager supplement to the rice and beans waiting for them at home. He hunched his shoulders against the wind, a solitary figure moving through the desolate, rain-swept streets of the city's forgotten borough. It was in an alleyway, a dark gash between two crumbling brick buildings, that he saw her. A small shape, barely visible in the gloom, huddled against the cold, indifferent brick. He almost walked past, his mind already on Maya, on the story he would read to her before she slept, but something stopped him. A flicker of movement, a sound that was almost a sob, swallowed by the wind. He hesitated, a war waging within him between the city dweller's ingrained caution and the father's innate empathy. He took a tentative step closer, and the shape resolved into the form of a young girl, perhaps a few years older than Maya. Her thin frame racked with shivers, her face pale and streaked with rain and tears. Her eyes, wide and terrified, met his. In that moment, she was not a stranger, not a threat, but a child, alone and afraid in a storm. He thought of Maya, safe in their small apartment, and the thought was a physical blow. The world could be so cruel, so unforgiving. He couldn't leave her here. He couldn't be the kind of man who walked away. He took a deep breath, the cold, damp air filling his lungs, and slowly extended his hand, his voice gentle against the roar of the storm. "Are you okay?" he asked, the words feeling small and inadequate, but carrying the immense weight of his compassion. The girl flinched, but didn't run. She just stared at his outstretched hand, a hand calloused and worn from labor, a hand that offered nothing more than a momentary reprieve from the cold. A simple, human connection in the heart of a storm. The apartment was a sanctuary of warmth and dim, gentle light against the fury of the storm outside. The moment Leo pushed the door open, the scent of boiled rice and old books wrapped around them, a stark contrast to the cold, metallic smell of the rain-drenched city. Maya, a small whirlwind of bright energy, ran to him, her face lighting up with a smile that could have powered the entire building. "Daddy!" she cried, wrapping her small arms around his wet legs. Her eyes then fell upon the strange girl standing hesitantly in the doorway, dripping a small puddle onto the worn linoleum floor. Maya's smile didn't falter. It merely shifted into a look of open, innocent curiosity. Leo gently nudged the girl forward, into the small circle of warmth cast by a single, bare-bulbed lamp. "Maya, honey, this is—" he trailed off, realizing he didn't even know her name. She was caught in the storm, We're going to help her get warm." Maya needed no further explanation. She trotted over to the girl, her expression serious, and held out her most prized possession. A one-eyed, threadbare teddy bear named Barnaby. "You can hold him," she offered. "He's very brave in storms." The girl, who had been trembling uncontrollably, seemed to still at the child's simple, unconditional welcome. Her gaze moved from Maya's earnest face to the small, offered toy, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than fear crossed her features. While Maya was introducing Barnaby, Leo moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency born of years of single fatherhood. He ladled the last of their vegetable soup into a bowl, the steam rising in a fragrant cloud, and placed it on their small, wobbly kitchen table. He handed the girl a dry, mended towel, its fabric soft from 1,000 washings, and then a set of Maya's old pajamas, which would be too small but were dry and warm. The girl accepted everything with a silent, wide-eyed bewilderment. As if these small, common kindnesses were a foreign language she was only just beginning to comprehend. She ate the soup slowly at first, then with a hunger that spoke of a long time without food. Leo and Maya sat with her, their own meager portions of rice tasting richer in the shared act of giving. Leo asked no prying questions, sensing the fragility of the girl's composure. The story, whatever it was, would come when it was ready. For now, all that mattered was the warmth of the small room, the gentle murmur of the rain outside, and the profound unspoken truth that for one night, a stranger was no longer a stranger, but a guest, sheltered not by wealth or grandeur, but by the boundless compassion of a father and his child. The small apartment was a map of Leo's life, each object a landmark of love, struggle, and resilience. It was a space where every inch was utilized, where necessity had long ago triumphed over aesthetics. The couch, where the girl now sat wrapped in a thick patched quilt, was faded and sagging, its springs groaning a soft protest with every movement. But it was clean, and it was where Leo read stories to Maya every night. The bookshelf in the corner was made of cinder blocks and planks of salvaged wood. Yet it overflowed with well-loved children's books, rescued from thrift stores and library sales, their spines soft and broken from countless readings. A single crayon-drawn picture of a smiling sun, taped to the peeling paint of the wall, was Maya's contribution to the decor, a defiant splash of color in a world of muted grays and browns. The air itself held the history of their lives, the faint, lingering scent of the cheap, lavender-scented soap they used, the warm, comforting smell of rice, and the underlying dampness of an old building that could never quite shake the winter chill. The girl, who introduced herself only as Clara, seemed to be absorbing every detail. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, roamed the room, lingering on the small, meaningful things. The way Leo's worn work boots were placed neatly by the door, the single photograph on the wall of a smiling woman who had Maya's eyes, the way Maya hummed a tuneless song to her one-eyed bear as she prepared for bed. Clara was a study in contrasts within this humble setting. Her clothes, though soaked and mud-stained, were made of a fine, soft material that Leo had never felt before. The small silver locket around her neck, which she clutched reflexively, seemed to hum with a quiet, expensive gleam even in the dim light. It was clear she was from another world, a world of comfort and privilege he could barely imagine. Yet, here, she seemed not like a princess in a pauper's hovel, but like a ship that had finally found a safe harbor after a long and terrifying storm. Leo made a makeshift bed for her on the couch, using his own pillow and the warmest blanket they owned. He felt a pang of guilt at the meagerness of the offering, but it was all he had. As Maya, already in her small bed in the corner of the living room that served as her bedroom, began to drift off to sleep, Leo saw Clara watching her, an expression of profound longing on her face. He sat down in the room's only armchair, its floral pattern worn away to a pale ghost of its former self. He didn't speak, not yet. He simply sat, a quiet, reassuring presence, a guardian against the storm that still raged outside, and the storms that clearly raged within the young girl he had taken in. In the quiet intimacy of the room, with the rhythm of his daughter's soft breathing and the drumming of the rain, a fragile, unspoken trust began to form, a bridge between two worlds built on a foundation of simple human decency. Miles away, in a part of the city that Leo only ever saw in magazines and on television, another storm was raging, this one within the cold, marble and glass walls of a sprawling mansion. Arthur Sterling stood before a floor-to-ceiling window, the city lights a glittering, indifferent carpet spread out below him. He held a crystal glass of amber liquid, but he wasn't drinking. His hand was so tight around the glass that his knuckles were white, the only sign of the violent tempest of fear and rage that was consuming him. His world, a world he had meticulously built and controlled with ruthless efficiency, had fractured. His daughter, Clara, was gone. The room was a monument to wealth and power. The carpets were hand-woven silk, the art on the walls was worth more than Leo's entire apartment building, and the silence was deep and profound, broken only by the frantic, hushed voices of the staff and security team he had assembled. Men in sharp suits spoke into earpieces, their faces grim. A weary-looking police detective was trying to ask him questions, but Arthur couldn't focus. His mind was a chaotic loop of what-ifs and where is she's. He saw her face everywhere. In the rain lashing against the window. In the distorted reflection in his untouched drink. He saw her as a little girl, all bright eyes and scraped knees, and as the withdrawn, quiet teenager she had become. The detective's voice cut through his haze. "Mr. Sterling, had she seemed unhappy recently? Was there an argument?" An argument? Their whole life had become a long, drawn-out argument. A silent war of his expectations and her quiet rebellion. After his wife had passed away 5 years prior, he had poured all his energy into two things, his business empire and protecting Clara. But his protection had become a gilded cage. He controlled her schedule, her friends, her future, all under the guise of keeping her safe, of giving her the world. He had given her everything money could buy, but he had failed to give her the one thing she truly needed. Himself. His time. His attention. His understanding. He had been a provider, a guardian, but had he been a father? The question echoed in the vast, empty space of his heart. The juxtaposition was brutal. As Leo was offering his last bowl of soup in a cramped, warm kitchen, Arthur Sterling stood in his cold, cavernous palace, a king with a broken kingdom, realizing with sickening clarity that his immense fortune was utterly useless. It couldn't turn back time, it couldn't mend the broken trust, and it couldn't find his lost daughter in the sprawling, unforgiving city. The richest man in the city was, in that moment, the most impoverished of all. The morning light, gray and diluted by the persistent overcast sky, filtered through the apartment's single, large window, painting the room in soft, muted tones. The storm had passed, leaving behind a city washed clean and a profound stillness that felt both peaceful and heavy with unspoken questions. Clara was the first to wake, her body stiff from the unfamiliar couch, her mind slowly re-engaging with the reality of her situation. For a moment, a wave of panic threatened to pull her under, but then she heard it. The soft, rhythmic sizzle of something in a pan and the low, gentle murmur of a man's voice. She sat up, clutching the patched quilt, and saw Leo at the small stove, his back to her, and Maya sitting at the table, meticulously coloring in a worn-out coloring book. The scene was so domestic, so normal, it felt like something from a dream. Leo turned, a spatula in his hand, and gave her a small, tired smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "There's toast." It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of fact. He placed a single, perfectly golden-brown slice of toast on a plate and set it on the table in front of her. Then he divided the single egg he had been frying into 2 small portions, one for Maya and one for Clara, leaving none for himself. He would have coffee, he told himself. That would be enough. Maya looked up from her drawing and pushed the plate closer to Clara. "It's better with jam," she said, pointing to a small, nearly empty jar in the center of the table. This simple act of sharing, of giving away a portion of a meal that was already so meager, struck Clara with a force that left her breathless. At home, breakfast was a silent affair in a vast dining room, a buffet of choices served by staff she barely knew. It was abundant and impersonal. This single slice of toast, offered with such genuine care, felt more nourishing than any feast she had ever eaten. She finally spoke, her voice quiet and raspy. "My name is Clara." She didn't offer a last name, and Leo didn't ask for one. She then began to weave a vague, half-true story about getting separated from her family on a trip, of a missed bus and a dead phone. Leo listened patiently, his expression revealing nothing but gentle concern. He knew the story was thin, full of holes, but he also saw the desperate plea for belief in her eyes. He wasn't a detective, he was a father, and what he saw was a child who was running from something, not just lost. Now came the difficult part. He had to go to work. His boss, a man with a temper as short as his patience for excuses, would not tolerate another absence. But the thought of leaving Clara alone, or sending her back out into the city, was unthinkable. He looked at his own daughter, happily sharing her crayons with the newcomer, and the decision made itself. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over his boss's number, knowing that the call might cost him his job, the very job that kept this small, safe world afloat. The phone call was short and brutal, just as Leo had anticipated. His boss, Mr. Date Henderson, did not appreciate being told, with less than an hour's notice, that his most reliable worker wouldn't be coming in. "Family emergency?" Leo had mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. It wasn't entirely a lie, he reasoned. The girl on his couch felt like a responsibility that was as binding as blood. Henderson's response was a string of gruff, angry words that ended with a clear ultimatum: "Don't bother coming in tomorrow." The click of the phone ending the call was like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. The lifeline was cut. A cold dread, colder than the rain had been, seeped into Leo's bones. He stood for a long moment, the silent phone in his hand, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. It was a reckless, foolish choice. A choice made with the heart and not the head. He had sacrificed his family's security for a complete stranger. He looked over at the table where Maya and Clara were now sitting side by side, their heads bent over a drawing, their quiet chatter filling the small space. Clara was smiling. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. In that moment, watching the two girls, a strange sense of peace settled over him, pushing back the tide of panic. He had made the right choice. He had chosen humanity over security, kindness over practicality. Whatever the consequences, he would face them. He pushed the worry aside, forcing a smile onto his own face. "Well," he announced, his voice a little too loud, "it looks like I have the day off. What should we do?" Maya's eyes lit up. A day with her father was a rare and precious gift. "Can we build the pillow fort?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. "The really big one, with the blanket roof?" Leo's smile became real. "The biggest one ever," he promised. And so they did. They pulled the cushions off the couch and the chairs, using blankets for walls and a bedsheet for a grand ceiling. They crawled inside with a flashlight and the worn-out storybooks. Leo read to them, his voice a low, soothing rumble, telling tales of brave knights and faraway kingdoms. Inside their makeshift castle, the world of unpaid bills and angry bosses ceased to exist. There was only the dim, magical glow of the flashlight, the rustle of turning pages, and the shared warmth of three people who had, for a brief, perfect afternoon, formed a small, unlikely family. For Clara, it was a revelation. She had never built a pillow fort. She had never been read to with such gentle affection. This small, simple act of play was more magical than any expensive toy or exotic vacation her father had ever given her. She was not the daughter of a millionaire. She was just Clara, a little girl safe inside a fortress of blankets, listening to a story told by a man who had just risked everything for her. The city had woken up to the news of Clara Sterling's disappearance, and it was spreading like wildfire. What had started as a quiet, internal search by Arthur Sterling's private security had exploded into a full-blown media frenzy. Her face, a professionally taken school photograph in which she looked polished and profoundly sad, was on every television screen, every news website, every lamppost in the city center. The headline was always the same: "Millionaire's daughter missing." Arthur had authorized it. hating the exposure but driven by a desperation that overrode his deep-seated need for privacy. He had also announced a reward: $250,000, a life-changing sum of money, dangled like a lure, in the hope that someone, somewhere, had seen something. In his sterile, silent office high above the city, Arthur watched the news reports, his face a grim mask. He saw reporters camped outside his gates, interviewing former staff, school acquaintances, anyone who could offer a sliver of insight into the life of the enigmatic missing girl. They painted a picture of a life of unbelievable privilege, of private tutors and European holidays, but it was a flat, two-dimensional portrait that missed the aching loneliness at its core. Each report felt like a personal failure. He saw himself through the world's eyes, the powerful, controlling father whose daughter had to run away to find freedom. He paced the length of his office, the plush carpet muffling his angry, frantic footsteps. He had spent his life building an empire of concrete and steel, of stocks and bonds, a fortress of wealth designed to protect his family, but it had become a prison for his daughter, and now a torture chamber for him. The reward announcement had unleashed a torrent of false leads and cruel hoaxes, each phone call a new cycle of hope and crushing disappointment. His team was vetting every tip, but Arthur knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that Clara wouldn't be found that way. She wasn't a victim of some random crime. She was a fugitive from the life he had built for her. He remembered their last conversation, a disagreement over a summer internship he had arranged at his company. "I want to do something real," she had pleaded. "I want to volunteer to help people." He had dismissed it as a childish fantasy, a naive whim. "You'll do as you're told," he had said, his voice cold and final. "It's for your own good." Now the memory of his own dismissive words mocked him. He had been so focused on preparing her for the world he knew that he had refused to see the world she wanted. The search for his daughter was becoming a desperate search for his own soul, for the man, the husband, the father he was supposed to be. And as the hours ticked by, the terrifying possibility grew that he might be too late to find either. The day inside the pillow fort had been a magical escape, a bubble of peace in a tumultuous world. But reality, with its sharp edges and cold demands, could not be kept at bay forever. As evening approached, the need for groceries became undeniable. Their small pantry was nearly bare. With a heavy heart, Leo counted the few crumpled bills in his wallet. It would be enough for bread, some pasta, and maybe a small carton of eggs if he was lucky. Leaving the girls alone was not an option, so the three of them bundled up and headed out into the crisp evening air. The city had a different energy now that the rain had stopped. The streets were bustling, the shop windows bright and inviting. Maya, holding Leo's hand, skipped along the pavement, her earlier listlessness gone, replaced by the simple joy of being with her father. Clara walked quietly on his other side, her eyes taking in the sights and sounds of a neighborhood so different from her own. It was a community of vibrant murals on brick walls, of small, family-owned stores with hand-painted signs, and the sound of music spilling from open doorways. As they passed a small electronics store, a row of televisions in the window all flickered with the same image. It was a news broadcast, and on the screen was a face Clara knew all too well, her own. Leo stopped, his eyes drawn to the screen. He saw the words, "Missing" and "Reward" in bold, stark letters. He saw the face of the girl from the school photograph, and then he looked down at the real girl standing beside him, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resignation. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The quiet, lost girl he had taken in, the girl who had shared his daughter's toast and laughed inside their pillow fort, was the missing heiress. Clara Sterling. The name echoed in his mind, a name associated with skyscrapers, society galas, and a level of wealth he couldn't even fathom. And the reward. $250,000. The number hung in the air, shimmering, impossible. It was a sum that could wipe out his debts, secure Maya's future, buy them a house, a car, a life free from the constant, gnawing anxiety of poverty. It was the answer to every desperate prayer he had ever whispered into the darkness. A torrent of emotions crashed over him: shock, disbelief, confusion, and a dizzying, terrifying temptation. He looked at Clara, who was now staring at the ground, her secret laid bare on a dozen television screens. She looked so small, so vulnerable. This wasn't just a news story anymore. This was the child who had held his daughter's teddy bear, the child he had protected from the storm. The central mystery of the quiet girl was solved. But a new, more profound conflict was just beginning. A battle that would be waged in the silent spaces of his own heart. The walk back to the apartment was a silent, tense affair. The easy camaraderie of the afternoon had evaporated, replaced by the heavy, unspoken weight of the truth. Maya, sensing the shift in mood, was quiet, her small hand clutching Leo's tightly. Leo's mind was a whirlwind. $250,000, the number pulsed behind his eyes, a hypnotic, seductive rhythm. He saw a flash of a different life, a warm coat for Maya, a doctor's appointment for her persistent cough that he could actually afford, a refrigerator full of fresh fruit, a future that wasn't a daily struggle for survival. The money wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was a cure for the 1,000 cuts of poverty that bled him dry each and every day. All he had to do was make a phone call. He would be a hero. The city would praise him. He would be the honest working-class man who had saved the millionaire's daughter. It was the perfect story. That end of the WWs, adder.uws. But then he looked at Clara. He saw the way she was hunched into herself, as if trying to disappear. He remembered the look in her eyes when she first saw him in the alley. Not just fear of the storm, but a deeper, more profound terror. She had run away. She had a reason. Turning her in for a reward suddenly felt like a betrayal. It felt like selling her. It was reducing his act of kindness, an act that had felt so pure and right, to a mere transaction. It was putting a price tag on a human being. The thought made him feel sick. Was that the man he was? Was that the lesson he wanted to teach his own daughter? That kindness was conditional? That compassion had a price? He thought about Arthur Sterling, the man on the news. His face a mask of anguish. He was a father, just like Leo. He deserved to know his daughter was safe. But Clara deserved to be heard, not just returned like a lost piece of property. The conflict was tearing him apart. His own desperate needs screamed at him to take the money, to seize this one chance to escape the crushing weight of his life. But his conscience, a quieter but more insistent voice, whispered that his integrity was the one thing he truly owned, the one legacy he could pass on to Maya. Back in the apartment, the silence was deafening. Clara sat on the edge of the couch, her hands twisted in her lap, refusing to meet his eyes. She was waiting for his judgment, for him to make the call and claim his prize. Leo looked around the small, shabby room, at the worn furniture, the peeling paint, and then at his own daughter, who was watching him with wide, trusting eyes. He knew what he had to do. It was the hardest decision of his life, but it was also the only one he could live with. He would not call the police for the reward. He would find a way to contact the father directly, not as a captor or an opportunist, but as another father, to talk about what was best for his child. The decision settled in Leo's heart, not with a sense of triumph, but with a quiet, somber resolve. The path of integrity was rarely the easiest one. The temptation of the reward money still lingered at the edges of his mind, a seductive whisper of a life without worry, but the core of his being, the part of him that was simply Maya's father, who knew it was the wrong path. He needed to find a way to reach Arthur Sterling directly, to bypass the media circus and the police hotlines that would treat Clara as a case file, and him as a potential suspect or a greedy opportunist. He wanted to ensure a conversation, not an interrogation. In the age of the internet, finding a point of contact for a man as public as Arthur Sterling should have been easy, but every official channel was a dead end, a firewall of secretaries and public relations officers. Leo spent hours on the small, cracked screen of his old smartphone, its battery draining with alarming speed, searching for a chink in the corporate armor. Finally, deep within an old business journal article, he found a mention of a direct line to Sterling's personal philanthropic foundation, an office number that seemed less guarded than the main corporate lines. His heart pounded in his chest as he dialed, each ring echoing the frantic beat. His hand, usually steady from years of physical labor, trembled slightly. He rehearsed the words in his head, trying to sound calm and credible, not like a kidnapper demanding a ransom. A crisp, professional voice answered, "Sterling Foundation? How may I direct your call?" Leo took a deep breath. "I need to speak with Mr. Sterling. It's a personal matter. A matter of the utmost urgency concerning his daughter." There was a skeptical pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, Mr. Sterling is not available. If you have information, you should contact the police hotline." "No," Leo insisted, his voice gaining a strength he didn't know he possessed. "You don't understand. I don't want the reward. I don't want to talk to the police. I need to talk to him, father to father. Please, just give him a message. Tell him Clara is safe. Tell him she is with a man named Leo, and she is being cared for. Tell him I'm not asking for anything. I just want to make sure she goes home safely." He gave the operator his own number, a prepaid cell phone with a handful of minutes left on it. The operator's tone shifted slightly, from dismissive to intrigued. The phrase, "father to father," and the refusal of the reward were not part of the usual script of crank calls. "I will pass the message along, sir," she said, a note of sincerity in her voice. Leo hung up, his body slumping with the release of tension. He had done it. He had cast the stone into the water. Now, he could only wait for the ripples. He looked over at Clara, who had been watching the entire exchange, her expression unreadable. He had just sealed their fates, and he had no idea if he had built a bridge or burned one down. For Arthur Sterling, the message, when it finally reached him through his frantic web of communication, was a single, baffling flash of light in a dark, endless tunnel. His security chief, a formidable ex-federal agent named Harris, delivered it with a heavy dose of skepticism. "We got a call, sir. Through the Foundation line. A man named Leo. Says he has her. Says she's safe." Arthur's heart leaped, a painful, hopeful spasm in his chest. "Where is he? Did he make a demand?" Harris's expression was grim. "That's the strange part. He gave a cell number. And he was specific. He said, and I quote, 'I don't want the reward. He wants to talk to you, father to father.'" The words hung in the air of the opulent office, a strange, discordant note in the symphony of wealth and power. It didn't make sense. In Arthur's world, everyone wanted something: money, power, influence. It was the currency of human interaction. A man who had his daughter and wanted nothing was an anomaly, a dangerous variable in an already volatile equation. "It's a trick," Harris stated flatly. "A psychological game. He'll make his demand once he has you on the line. He's trying to establish a rapport, to make you lower your guard." Arthur considered this. It was the logical, tactical assessment. But the phrase "father to father" resonated with him, striking a chord deep beneath the layers of cynicism and suspicion. It was a language he had almost forgotten he spoke. "Let me talk to him," Arthur said, his voice firm. The call was placed, and the security team listened in, ready to trace the signal, to analyze every word. When Leo's voice came on the line, it was not the voice of a hardened criminal. It was quiet, steady, and weary. "Mr. Sterling? This is he," Arthur said, his own voice tight with 1,000 emotions. "You have my daughter." "She is here," Leo confirmed simply. "She is safe. She's been with me since the storm." "What do you want?" Arthur asked, the question blunt, instinctual. There was a pause on the other end, and for a terrifying second, Arthur thought the line had gone dead. Then Leo spoke, his voice filled not with greed, but with a profound, simple dignity. "I want to make sure she's okay. I want to know that if she comes home, she'll be coming home to a father who will listen to her." The statement was so unexpected, so deeply personal, it was like a punch to the gut. It wasn't a demand. It was a challenge. This man wasn't a kidnapper. He was a guardian. He was advocating for his daughter. Arthur, the master negotiator, was left speechless. A meeting was arranged. Leo gave an address in a part of town Arthur's driver would have to use a map to find. Harris protested vehemently. It was too risky. It was a trap, but Arthur knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that it wasn't. He had to go. He had to see for himself the man who wanted nothing. The man who spoke of fatherhood as if it were a sacred trust, not a biological fact. He would go, not as a billionaire, but as a father, to answer the call of another. The journey to Leo's neighborhood was like traveling to another country. The gleaming skyscrapers and manicured parks of Arthur Sterling's world gave way to a landscape of low-slung brick buildings, faded storefronts, and streets that were clean but showed the wear of time and neglect. The sleek, black town car, a silent, imposing vessel of wealth, seemed to glide through the streets like a predator in a foreign jungle, drawing curious, resentful stares. Arthur sat in the plush leather interior, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of his own heart. His security team followed in a discreet SUV behind them, their presence both a comfort and a source of shame. He was going to meet a man who had sheltered his daughter, and he was arriving with an armed escort, a stark illustration of the chasm of trust and experience that separated their two worlds. When they arrived at the address, Arthur's first impression was one of profound disbelief. The building was old, its facade crumbling in places, a testament to a long life of quiet endurance. This was where his daughter, a girl accustomed to silk sheets and climate-controlled air, had spent the last 36 hours. He stepped out of the car, his expensive hand-stitched leather shoes looking absurdly out of place on the cracked and uneven pavement. He told Harris and his team to wait, a decision that went against every security protocol, but one he felt was essential. He had to do this alone, man to man. He climbed the narrow, dimly lit staircase, each step echoing in the quiet building. The air smelled of damp concrete and cooked cabbage, a smell of life, of struggle, that was utterly alien to him. He found the apartment door, its paint chipped, a small, handwritten welcome sign drawn by a child taped to it. He raised his hand to knock, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt a profound sense of powerlessness. He was not in a boardroom. He was at the threshold of a stranger's life, a life he had interrupted, a man he was about to face who held a mirror up to his own failings as a father. The door opened before he could knock. Leo stood there, a man of average height and build, his face etched with lines of fatigue, his clothes simple and worn but clean. He was not imposing or threatening. His eyes, however, held a quiet, unshakable strength. He simply nodded and stepped aside, allowing Arthur to enter. The apartment was small, smaller than Arthur's walk-in closet, yet it was meticulously tidy. And in the center of the room on the faded couch sat Clara. She was wearing a brightly colored, oversized sweater. Her hair was clean, and she was holding the hand of another little girl with bright, curious eyes. She was not terrified. She was not in distress. She looked calm, peaceful even. The sight of her, safe and whole in this humble, improbable sanctuary, was so overwhelming that Arthur felt his knees weaken. The fortress of his anger and fear, the one he had been living in for 2 days, began to crumble. The air in the small room was thick with unspoken words, a tense tableau of two worlds colliding. Arthur Sterling, a man accustomed to commanding rooms and dominating conversations, found himself utterly adrift. His eyes, which had been fixed on Clara, now turned to the man standing before him. He scanned Leo, taking in the frayed collar of his shirt, the weariness in his posture, and the complete absence of fear or avarice in his eyes. This was not the kind of man Arthur was used to dealing with. This was not a man motivated by the levers of power and money that he so expertly manipulated. He fell back on the only language he truly trusted. "What do you want?" he asked again, the question coming out more like a raw plea than a demand. Leo's gaze was direct, unwavering. He wasn't intimidated by the expensive suit or the aura of power that clung to Arthur like a second skin. "I already told you," Leo said, his voice quiet but firm. "I want nothing. Your daughter was alone and scared. I have a daughter. I did what I hope any parent would do." He gestured slightly toward Maya, who was watching the tall, imposing stranger with wide, solemn eyes. "That's it. The The simplicity of the statement was a disarming blow. Arthur had come prepared for a negotiation, a confrontation, a list of demands. He was not prepared for simple, unadorned decency. He had built his entire life on the principle of quid pro quo, of transaction and leverage. Leo's altruism was a concept so foreign it felt like a deliberate, calculated move, yet his sincerity was undeniable. "Everyone wants something," Arthur insisted, the words a reflection of his own jaded worldview. "A man in your position. The reward money. Kindness shouldn't have a price tag." Leo interrupted, the words gentle, but carrying the force of an unshakable conviction. "My daughter was watching me. What I do is what she will learn to be. I want her to learn to be kind, not to be an opportunist." At that, Arthur's carefully constructed composure finally shattered. He looked from Leo's dignified, tired face to his own daughter, who was watching him, her expression a mixture of fear and hope. He saw the oversized sweater she was wearing, a clear hand-me-down, and understood it was an act of generosity from a family who had almost nothing to give. He saw the half-eaten plate of pasta on the table, a meal likely meant for three that had been shared with a fourth. In this small, impoverished apartment, his daughter had been given a wealth of compassion and security that his mansions and private jets had never been able to provide. The realization was a quiet, devastating explosion in his soul, leveling the foundations of his pride and his certainty, leaving him exposed and humbled. It was Clara who finally broke the heavy silence. She let go of Maya's hand and stood up, taking a hesitant step toward her father. Her voice, when she spoke, was fragile but clear, imbued with a newfound strength that surprised them both. "I ran away because I couldn't breathe," she began, her eyes locked on her father's. "The house, the schedules, the tutors. It was a beautiful cage, but it was still a cage." Arthur wanted to protest, to defend himself, to list all the things he had provided, all the sacrifices he had made. But he held his tongue, forcing himself to truly listen for the first time. "You were always so scared," Clara continued, her voice gaining confidence. "Scared of me getting hurt, or kidnapped, or failing. But you were so busy protecting me from the world that you never let me live in it. You never saw me. You saw a project, an investment, the Sterling legacy." Each word was a small, sharp arrow piercing the armor of his self-justification. He realized she was right. After her mother's death, his grief had twisted into a suffocating, controlling fear. He had tried to bubble-wrap her life, to pave her path with gold, but in doing so, he had robbed her of the chance to walk it herself. "Here," Clara said, her gesture encompassing the small, shabby room. "I was scared at first, but then Leo gave me soup. Maya gave me her bed. They didn't ask who I was, or what I could do for them. They just saw a person who needed help." She looked over at Leo, a look of profound gratitude on her face. "They talked to me. They listened. We built a pillow fort and read stories. For a whole day, I felt normal. I felt safe in a way that all the security guards and alarm systems at home never made me feel." Her confession was not an accusation, but a heartfelt explanation. She was not rejecting him, but the life he had built around her. She was asking him to see her, the real Clara, not the heiress. The raw, honest plea in his daughter's voice accomplished what no business rival or corporate crisis ever had. It brought Arthur Sterling to his knees, metaphorically and almost literally. He felt the sting of tears in his eyes, an unfamiliar, burning sensation. He looked at his daughter, truly saw her, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a legacy to be protected, but a child who needed her father. Arthur Sterling's world had been fundamentally reordered. The core principles that had governed his life, that wealth equated to security, that control was a form of love, that everything had a price, had been dismantled in a matter of minutes in a rundown apartment. He looked at Leo, this quiet, unassuming man who possessed a form of wealth that could not be quantified on a balance sheet. He saw in him not a pauper to be pitied, but a man of immense character, a father whose love was not a cage but a shelter. A profound, humbling sense of shame washed over him, followed by an equally powerful wave of gratitude. This man had not only saved his daughter's life, but he had also in his own quiet way, saved Arthur from himself. He had held up a mirror, forcing him to confront the hollow man he had become. The drive to fix things, to make amends, was overwhelming. "The reward," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "You must take it. Please. It's not a payment. It's a token, a symbol of my gratitude. Your daughter. You shouldn't have to struggle." Leo shook his head gently, a small, sad smile on his face. "Mr. Sterling, you still don't understand. The moment I accept your money is the moment I teach Maya that what I did had a price. It becomes a transaction. And it wasn't a transaction. It was the right thing to do." The refusal, a second time, was even more powerful than the first. It left Arthur with no recourse. No way to rebalance the scales in the way he understood. He couldn't buy his way out of this debt of gratitude. He had to earn his way out. He had to change. An idea began to form in his mind. An idea born not of charity, but of genuine need. He needed a man like Leo. His company, his world, was filled with brilliant, ambitious, ruthless people. It was a world desperately lacking in simple, unshakable integrity. "You're right," Arthur conceded, his voice full of a respect he rarely afforded anyone. "But you've also shown me a gaping hole in my own life, in my work, my foundation. It gives money, but it lacks a heart. It lacks the perspective of someone who truly understands the struggle." He took a step closer to Leo, his tone shifting from that of a grateful father to that of a visionary leader. "I don't want to give you a handout. I want to offer you a job. Come and work for me. Run a new initiative for the foundation, a program for at-risk families, for children who slip through the cracks. I don't need another businessman. I need your character. I need your heart." The offer hung in the air, as unexpected and life-altering as the discovery of Clara's identity had been for Leo. It was not a reward. It was a recognition. It was a chance to transform his own hardship into a source of strength and hope for others, a chance to build a better life for Maya not with a lottery ticket, but with his own two hands, guided by the very principles that had led him to this moment. Leo was stunned into silence. The offer was beyond anything he could have possibly imagined. It wasn't just a job, it was a validation of his entire life, of the quiet, often difficult choices he had made every single day. The idea of using his own experiences, his own understanding of poverty and dignity, to help others was a dream he had never even dared to form. It was a chance to create a world where fewer children ended up like Clara, lost and alone in a storm. He looked at Maya, his anchor, his reason for everything, and he saw the future branching out before them. A path lit, not by the sudden glare of unearned wealth, but by the steady glow of purpose and opportunity. He accepted. The conversation that followed was not one of a billionaire and a warehouse worker, but of two men forging an unlikely partnership. Arthur was a man of immediate, decisive action. He insisted that Leo and Maya could not stay in the apartment. "This is not charity," Arthur stated firmly, preempting any protest. "It's a practical matter. My new director cannot be worried about a leaking roof or whether he can afford to heat his home. And," he added, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes, "Clara will want her new friend to be close by." He owned a small, charming guest house on his estate, a beautiful cottage that had sat empty for years. It was private, comfortable, and surrounded by gardens where the girls could play. It was a world away from the crumbling brick and cracked pavement, a gentle, welcoming transition into a new life. Leo, overwhelmed, could only nod in agreement. The departure from the small apartment was surreal. As Leo packed their few belongings into a couple of cardboard boxes, he felt a strange mix of nostalgia and relief. This small space had been their fortress, the scene of so many struggles and so much love. It was the place where he had brought a stranger in from the cold, an act that had unlocked a future he never knew was possible. Clara and Maya held hands the entire time, their bond already cemented, their whispers and giggles a melody of hope in the quiet rooms. As they left, Leo took one last look at the pillow fort, which still stood in the middle of the living room, a monument to a single afternoon of kindness and imagination. It was a fragile fortress made of blankets and dreams, and yet it had been strong enough to change the world. The transformation was like stepping from a black-and-white photograph into a world of vibrant color. The guest house was not a palace, but to Leo and Maya, it was a paradise. It had a small, sunny kitchen with a refrigerator that was always full. It had a cozy living room with a real fireplace. And Maya had her own bedroom, painted a soft, sunny yellow, with a proper bed and a shelf that was quickly filled with new books and art supplies, gifts from a delighted and grateful Clara. But the changes were more than just material. Leo threw himself into his new role at the Sterling Foundation, with a passion and dedication that amazed everyone, including Arthur. He wasn't a man of spreadsheets and corporate jargon, but he was a man who understood people. He walked the same streets he had once walked as a desperate father, but now he did so with the resources to make a real difference. He established after-school programs in underserved neighborhoods, created emergency funds for families facing eviction, and built a network of community support that was based on dignity and respect, not just handouts. He became a bridge between the world of wealth and the world of need. His own life story, the most powerful testament to the Foundation's new mission. The friendship between Maya and Clara blossomed. They were inseparable, their different backgrounds irrelevant to the simple, profound connection they shared. They spent their afternoons exploring the vast gardens of the estate, having tea parties with Clara's extensive doll collection, and reading stories in the guest house, their laughter a constant, joyful sound that seemed to heal the quiet, lonely corners of the grand estate. Clara, too, was transforming. With the suffocating pressure of her father's expectations lifted, she began to discover her own passions. She volunteered alongside Leo at the Foundation, showing a natural empathy and a keen understanding of the children they helped. She was no longer a sad little princess in a gilded cage, but a vibrant, compassionate young woman finding her own purpose. Arthur watched it all unfold, with a sense of wonder and profound humility. He was learning to be a father again, not a warden. He and Clara started having dinner together every night, not out of obligation, but because they wanted to. They talked, truly talked, about her day, her dreams, her fears. He was finally listening. He had his daughter back, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that he owed it all to the quiet, dignified man who lived in his guest house. The relationship between Leo and Arthur evolved into a deep, unlikely friendship. Their weekly meetings for the Foundation often bled into long, personal conversations. They would sit in Arthur's vast, ornate study, a room that had once intimidated Leo, and talk for hours. The barriers of class and wealth had dissolved, leaving only two fathers, bound by their love for their daughters and a shared profound respect for one another. One evening, as they sat by the fire, a rare moment of quiet reflection, Arthur confessed something he had never told another soul. "Before you and Maya came into our lives," he began, his voice low, "I was adrift. After my wife died, the grief, it was a cancer. I thought that by controlling everything, by building this empire, I could keep the chaos of the world at bay. I thought I could prevent any more pain." He swirled the drink in his hand, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. "But I was just building walls. And I had locked myself inside with my own ghosts. I was so afraid of losing Clara that I was squeezing the life out of her, out of both of us." He turned to Leo, his expression raw and vulnerable. "That night, when you called, you didn't just save Clara from the storm. You saved me from myself. You and Maya, you came into this cold, empty house and you filled it with life, with warmth. You reminded me what a family is supposed to feel like." Leo listened, his heart aching with empathy for this man who had seemed so powerful and invulnerable. He understood the language of loss and fear. "We all just do the best we can, Arthur," Leo said softly. "We make mistakes. Being a parent it's like navigating without a map. All you can do is follow your heart and hope you're going in the right direction." Arthur nodded, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, gleaming in the firelight. "Your heart led you in the right direction," he said. It led you to my daughter. And it led you here. I can never repay you for that." "There's nothing to repay," Leo replied, his voice firm with the same simple conviction he'd had from the beginning. "We're family now." In that quiet moment, the full circle of their journey was complete. The initial act of kindness had not been a one-way street. Leo had given Clara shelter, and in return, the Sterlings had given him and Maya security. But beyond that, they had given each other something far more precious: the healing gift of genuine human connection. The poor single dad and the lonely millionaire had found in each other a brother, and in doing so, had built a single, unified family, stronger than any corporate empire and more valuable than any fortune. The scene is a birthday party. It is Maya's 8th, and the garden of the guest house has been transformed into a place of joyful chaos. Balloons in every color of the rainbow are tied to tree branches. A long table groans under the weight of a magnificent cake and piles of food, and the sound of children's laughter fills the warm afternoon air. Children from the neighborhood, from the foundation's programs, and from Clara's school are all playing together. A happy, diverse mix of backgrounds united in the universal pursuit of fun. Leo stands by the grill, flipping burgers, a comfortable, happy smile on his face. He is wearing a simple polo shirt and jeans, looking every bit the suburban dad, the weight of the world lifted from his shoulders. Arthur is beside him, looking slightly out of place in his expensive slacks but holding a plate, eagerly awaiting a burger. He is laughing, a deep, genuine sound that is heard more and more often these days. Clara and Maya, wearing matching party dresses, are leading a game of tag, their faces flushed with excitement. They move as one, a unit, their bond as clear and bright as the summer sun. At one point, Maya stumbles and falls, scraping her knee. Before Leo can even move, Arthur is there, kneeling on the grass, his pristine trousers begetting smudges. He helps Maya up, his expression one of pure, fatherly concern, and walks her over to a chair where Clara is already waiting with a first aid kit. The two men, the two fathers, catch each other's eye over the heads of the children. In that shared glance, a universe of understanding passes between them. It is a look of shared gratitude, of quiet wonder at the strange, beautiful path their lives have taken. It all began with a single, simple choice on a dark and stormy night. The choice to open a door to a stranger, to offer warmth without question, to show kindness without expecting a reward. That one small act, a flicker of light in the darkness, had not faded. Instead, it had grown, igniting other lights, creating a chain reaction of hope and healing that had redefined their futures. The story of Leo and Clara was a modern-day fairy tale, not of princes and paupers, but of the redemptive power of compassion. It was a testament to the profound truth that the greatest poverty is a life without connection, and the greatest wealth we can ever accumulate is the love we give away, proving that a heart full of kindness is the only shelter that can truly withstand any storm.